Our speaker today is Carol Stock Kranowitz. She's the author of numerous very authoritative books on the topic, and she will be giving us insights from her newly published, just published book called The Out of Sync Child Grows Up, Coping with SPD in the Adolescent and Young Adult Years. Some of the things she'll be talking about are strategies for living better with SPD, including how to find comfortable clothes, eat out, get out of the house, sleep, socialize. She'll talk about treatment options from occupational therapy to do-it-yourself treatments, and she'll give us some insights and perspectives from people living with SPD who were profiled in her book. Let me introduce her slightly in case you don't know Carol Stock Kranowitz. She is an extraordinary resource for all of us. She's been treating and writing about sensory processing disorder for over 20 years. She speaks internationally about SPD's effect on children's learning and behavior and how families and professionals can help. And her very first book in a series called The Out of Sync Child is very widely credited with having raised awareness of SPD throughout the larger special needs, parenting, and disability community in a way that it is really needed to be brought to everyone's awareness. Kranowitz graduated from Barnard College. She earned her MA in Education and Human Development from George Washington University. She lives in Maryland, where she plays the cello and has 5 grandchildren. Thank you so much, Carol, for being with us today. We're so grateful for your time and for all the work that you do.
Susan, it's my great pleasure.
Before we start, let me just take a moment to mention the sponsor of today's webinar, which we do each week. We are so grateful. As you know, these sponsors allow us to present this extremely valuable information, such as this one this week, every single week at no cost to any of you. And the sponsor of today's webinar is called ForeBrain. And ForeBrain, F-O-R-B-R-A-I-N, is a unique technology that helps improve attention and sensory processing in both children and adults. By speaking into the ForeBrain headphone, ForeBrain increases attention, listening skills, and sensory functions and sharpens the auditory system, helping retrain information and the way it's processed. For more information, please visit the ForeBrain website, www.forebrain.com. So thank you, ForeBrain. Let me just briefly clarify the webinar process. You may post your questions in the box on your screen at any time. Your participation is completely anonymous. After Carol has presented her slide presentation and overview, she'll answer as many questions as we have time for. If you have problems hearing us, it's probably likely that it's your internet connection, and you should dial in via your phone line. You'll see the phone number on your control panel if you tick phone on the top. If you'd like to take notes during the webinar, please download the slides now from the control panel on your right in the handouts section. You can use that to take notes, follow along. Or if after the session ends, you'd like to listen again, or sometimes have a spouse or a teacher listen, you'll find a replay of this webinar, including the presentation slides for download on the Attitude website. It's attitudemag.com/webinars. So with that lengthy introduction, let me thank Carol again and turn the mic over to her. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. So I'm just delighted to be here talking to my friends in the SPD and ADHD world. Talking today about the book, The Out of Sync Child Grows Up, that was finally published yesterday. In 1998, I wrote The Out of Sync Child for parents and teachers, lay people who needed to know about this condition that's been around since time began, but very few people know about it. And as soon as that book was published in 1998, 16 years ago? 18 years ago. I started to get people saying, well, what happens next? You've written about younger children. What about the kids who grow up with this? It took me a while. Here it is. And I have to thank about 50 adolescents and young adults and some older adults looking back who have written about what it's like growing up, because I don't know. I don't have this condition myself. And just a small correction, I don't treat children. I'm an observer. So let's go and ask you a few questions to consider. And I'm having a little difficulty moving this forward.
Carol,
Yes.
click your cursor in the screen, and now try. There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so, dear listeners, are you a man or a woman who finds it difficult to be touched? You don't want touch, especially light or unexpected touch. Or are you a man or woman who really craves caresses and deep pressure on your skin? Do you avoid busy, crowded situations at parties, bars, and football games? Or do you love them? Are you an adult who never lets your feet leave the ground? You are not going to be having a fun time at the amusement park. Or are you one who loves to move constantly and twirl and climb and rock scramble and drive fast like Evel Knievel? Are you a man or woman who enjoys relaxing on the couch and you are at home in front of your computer, or are you wiggling and jiggling all day long? Do you find that you are a little clumsy with getting dressed? Can you imagine getting dressed in the dark, in a dark closet? If that's not you, if you find that you can't get dressed unless you're standing in front of a mirror, you might be a person who has sensory processing problems. Flossing your teeth, parallel parking, these are everyday things that might be challenging for you. Do you find you have low stamina? Not a lot of vitality? Do you struggle with self-esteem? How about your relationships with others? Are they rocky? And how about paying attention even when you're keenly interested in what you're thinking about or talking about? Do you find you're easily distracted by what's going on around you? Now, all of these could be characteristics of a person with ADHD, but it may be that you have SPD and not ADHD. It could also be that you have both ADHD and SPD. There are many people who do have both. Sensory processing disorder, if you don't know, is difficulty in how the brain, which is at the top of the central nervous system, takes in, organizes, and uses sensory messages that we get through our receptors in our body for everyday functioning. So we're taking in sensory information through our eyes, ears, muscles and joints, skin, inner ear, and we use those sensations. We integrate them, modulate them, analyze them, and use them for immediate and appropriate everyday functioning. For example, you hear a truck rumbling down the road as you're standing poised to cross the street, and that rumbling of the truck tells you jump back. You don't think about it hard. You just react instinctively if all is going well. But sometimes with SPD, the processing falters and you might not jump back quickly. What happens with SPD is that sensory stimuli from our own bodies, from the environment around us, can cause problems in movement, emotions, relationships, attention, and adaptations to the demands that we're constantly getting from our environment. So, whom does a SPD affect? People of all ages, males and females, and it appears that this is, like other neurological issues, mostly a male problem. There are more boys and men with it than women. And people of all races. This is a very egalitarian condition. I want to add that all people with autism have SPD. Some people with ADHD have SPD. People with SPD may have only that and not ADHD and not autism, just so you got that clear. So in this book, The Out of Sync Child Grows Up, I've broken it into 3 parts, and one part is how SPD affects activities of daily living. My contributors are wonderful, giving, sharing people who want the world to know. And when I asked them to contribute to the book, I said, I won't ask you specific questions. I want you to tell me and our readers, what is it that you really want the world to know that they just aren't getting about what it's like to have sensory issues? And so I'm going to read to you a bit from Dan Travis's story about grooming. This is in the book. And he's writing about his problems with bathing, brushing his teeth, combing his hair as an elementary school student. Okay. Eventually, he writes, I would figure out that those traits that drove people away, that led people to scorn me, and that confused and constantly irritated me, were all a part of a hidden neurological disorder. My life has been deeply impacted by SPD, and being called cockroach is just one of many hurtful names I have been called as a result of my symptoms. In recent years, I have started to really get to the root of these problems with my occupational therapist. And by the way, listeners, Dan is doing fabulously well with his occupational therapist who uses a sensory integration approach. The therapy is called OTSI. Dan continues, my tactile system has been rewired to become much more tolerant of many of the touch sensations I encounter in daily life. OT can make dreams come true. My story has been a testament to that. And yet, even after my nervous system became more relaxed to these sensations, my mind was still psychologically hardwired into avoiding them. I had to spend time working on removing my beliefs that these forms of tactile stimuli would still be painful. When I accomplished that, however, I was finally able to do the things I once could never bear. I have finally gotten to a place where brushing my teeth won't send me over the edge. My teeth are in pretty bad shape and I have 10 cavities. However, I am now beginning to reverse my resistance to dental hygiene. I am also able to appreciate a daily shower. Even if I never truly enjoy these things, being able to do them without them wreaking havoc on me and sending me into a state of overload has been amazing. So there's Dan. Other activities of daily living that are illustrated by the contributors' stories are getting dressed. The difficulty with finding the right clothes is paramount. Some people wear the same clothes in different colors, but the same outfit once they find one, that's all they wear. And they like to be some of them like to be as little dressed as possible. Eating is a major issue for many of our friends with SPD because of the texture, the temperature, the look of the food, the way it sounds when they're chewing it, the taste of it, the smell of it. All of the senses get involved in eating, all of the senses. And if you have an issue with any of them, it can affect eating. Leaving the house. This was something that never occurred to me. I pick up my car keys and out I go. to go to the grocery store, but when I heard from all these writers, many of them talked about the difficulty of stepping out from the peace and sanctity of their home into the wild, wild world. This might be something that affects you too. Going to school and to work, it takes courage and stamina to get out there. I'm going to read to you about sleeping. This is from Shonda Lucas. She has always has problems sleeping because of her auditory overresponsivity. So here's what she says. What is sleep like for a teenager with SPD? For me, it was a mixed bag. When I was overstimulated, there was no sleeping. Other nights, when I was in an underresponsive cycle, I was able to sleep for what felt like days, and I could fall asleep anywhere. Sometimes it felt like I couldn't get enough sleep, no matter how early I went to bed or what time I got up. There were also nights, though, that I couldn't fall asleep under any circumstance. It felt like I had bugs crawling on my skin, and if my blanket touched me, it actually hurt. Those nights, nothing helped, so I would just have to suffer until the next night and hope to be so tired I could sleep through the buggy feeling. I became a sheet snob. I had to have 100% cotton sheets, and the higher the thread count, the better. I still sleep under a heavy comforter even in the middle of a hot and sticky summer. The heat doesn't matter, as I need the heaviness to be comfortable. So that's Shonda. And I just want to mention to you, she talks about being overstimulated, she couldn't sleep, and being understimulated, she could sleep forever. Shonda is a sensory fluctuator, and that might be occurring with you too, where some days she's oversensitive, other days she's undersensitive. The out-of-sync child goes on after we hear from people discussing how SPD affects their daily living, and I narrate around and through their contributions. The book goes on to part about relationships. So SPD certainly affects how you manage to get along with your family. Some people are blessed with really understanding and flexible families. Others have families who don't understand the person who has great sensitivities or sleeps a lot or doesn't sleep, etc. SPD also affects dating and kissing and beyond, and that is discussed in the book. Now I'm just going to read you another quote from excuse me, a gentleman named Paul Balius. Paul is an adult who's had SPD all his life and recently has found out about it and now is on a mission to talk about it as much as possible and work with people to help them. He reflects on his feelings of shame and inadequacy as a man. This was a huge issue for him because men are supposed to be strong and not have issues that a lot of women can maybe be better understood for having. So here's Paul writing about making friends. Growing up, I never talked to anyone about my condition. I did not know how. It just became part of who I was. It did not make sense to me, so how could I bring it up? SPD became my hidden secret. Even I find my condition very strange today. I know that most people will never understand, and some will even make fun of my condition. This has happened as I grew and as I shared some details about it. It is so hurtful when someone mocks something that is so painful to me. However, if being mocked will help a fellow sufferer or help a parent of a child, then so be it. My compassion for others outweighs my pride. Growing to manhood was difficult. Men of our time are faced with many distorted examples of what being a man means. So many men develop inappropriate ways to prove themselves, to fit in among other men, to be admired by women. In my life, this issue was compounded by low self-esteem caused by the shame of having a sensory condition. It was painful to be around men in most situations. I felt weak, not masculine enough, because I would have pain from normal everyday sights and sounds. I felt unworthy. I could not fit in. I was so lost growing up, trying to become a man in all the wrong ways. Loners are outcasts. How could I ever feel like a man? I was very wild as a teenager, always trying to run away from things. I found equally wild boys, and we would do crazy things. And Paul goes on in the book talking about some of the crazy things. And if you read it and you don't know about SPD, you sure might look at a fellow like Paul and say, oh, he's a guy with ADHD. Living an in-sync life concludes the book. This part has to do with what people can do to treat SPD. Sometimes it's over the counter. People find ways that help them, like intense activities, running, swimming hard, jumping on a trampoline, going to a gym and working out hard. Those are very satisfying ways. Martial arts are quite satisfying for many people with SPD. Also, both the ones who are oversensitive to sensations and the ones who are undersensitive and have a loose muscle tone. And also to those with SPD who have poor motor coordination. Getting out there and outdoors or indoors in a gym and doing vigorous work is what many people find most successful. Others find reading and listening to music is their therapy. Stroking a cat, gardening, everyone finds what works best. If you need some help, the most appropriate therapy is occupational therapy using the sensory integration approach. And the goals of OTSI are to improve a person's everyday life skills. And here in parentheses on the slide, you can see what some of these are. Tactile responses, because those are biggies. How you touch and how you are touched. Balance and posture and body awareness and gross and fine motor control. These are how you move and how you are moved. And then other skills like bilateral coordination, using both sides of this body together. Eye motor skills, how you read, how you watch a ball coming towards you. OTSI also helps a person with self-help, self-esteem, social participation, and getting organized in your life, in your work, in your schoolwork. And organization surely is a problem that many of you listeners have, and OT can help you with that. And here are some other excellent therapies. Physical therapy using a sensory integration approach. It's called PTSI. Vision therapy. I am a big supporter of vision therapy, having had it successfully to help my eye motor skills where my two eyes didn't want to work together. Listening therapy, that is very helpful for people with auditory issues. And listening therapy is where you wear headphones, you listen to music like Bach or Mozart, you do motor tasks like walk on a balance beam, and you meanwhile toss bean bags into baskets, and you're working many, many sensory systems simultaneously. Psychotherapy is useful for people who have developed sidelines of depression and anxiety and esteem problems. I would say for the younger children, the physical therapies like OT and PT and vision and listening, I would say those are where you would go first, psychotherapy later. Speech and language therapy is excellent for all ages, and also yoga, martial arts, and a list here that you can read. So do-it-yourself treatment, people find what works for them. And the book, Growing an In-Sync Child, also ends with some pretty uplifting suggestions from some of my readers. Of course, you understand that the people who've contributed to my book have positive things to say about how SPD has informed them and helped them develop into people they want to be now. They're proud now. Their SPD has made them much more sensitive than they feel they ever could have been without the challenges. They feel like they can face adversity, and they have developed perseverance. They're goal-oriented. They're service-oriented. They want to reach out and help other people. They are so mindful and so beautiful. I have come up with a term for people who live with SPD and succeed with it, and the term is extrasensory grace. It's a grace we all can aspire to. If you have SPD and you're listening to this, maybe you are among those who have this extra sensory grace. I admire you so greatly. So finally, one little word from Tyler Ann Whitney. She's about 16 years old now, and she is a sensory craver. She's not shying away from sensations, she's looking for them. Here she is. I'm a sensory craver, which means that I find sensory input all by myself. I am constantly swinging, flipping, or bending over backwards. I especially like and need a lot of vestibular input. When I was younger, I did not get OT, but my parents used to brush my limbs, and the deep pressure felt so good. I had a chewy tube, which is a safe thing to chew on that stimulates oral and proprioceptive input. I do very well in school and on the high school softball team. At school, when I'm supposed to be sitting down like everyone else, I'm usually sitting with my feet under me or just squatting with my feet on the chair. At home, I rest on the floor with my knees under me to do my homework. I like jumping on the trampoline, stretching, all sports, and martial arts. I love doing fun outdoorsy things like camping, hiking, rock climbing, and rappelling. I am a thrill seeker. At the Grand Canyon, I jumped off a 40-foot waterfall several times because I love the sensation of falling through space. Although I am living with a sensory processing disorder, I am doing just fine. It is fun to explain to your friends why you are acting like a child, even though you are a teenager. I am a sensory kid. Doesn't Tyler Ann Whitney sound like she has ADHD? But no, it's SPD. That's it in a nutshell, and now I think it's your turn. I'd love to answer whatever questions I can, and I hope you remember I'm not a clinician. I don't treat, I don't assess. I am an observer, and I hope with that kind of background as a teacher, I can help you answer some questions you have.
Thank you so much. That was fascinating. Wonderful to hear the voices of adults with SPD. Carol, there's some questions about diagnosis, especially distinguishing between ADHD and SPD and who diagnoses. Can you talk a little bit about how to get an SPD diagnosis?
Yes, the person to go to is an occupational therapist who does know about sensory integration. And I want to insist on that because there are many wonderful OTs who have not had training in sensory integration, and so they can help you, but not as spot on as one who's has had the extra training. To find one, you can go to this website, www.spdstar.org. And you can, there's a registry there, and you can look in your area and find someone in your area, or go to a doctor. But remember that many doctors do not know about SPD. They haven't read the research. They may say poo-poo. So be ready for that. Now, to differentiate it from ADHD, an OT can help you do that.
I'm going to make sure we get that right. It's spdstar.org.com.
Yes, .org.
Right, okay. That sounds really helpful. Yes. Okay. And curiosity from some of the listeners as to, I think you made a statement that most people with autism, or all people with autism, also have sensory integration problems. Can you talk about that? Has that been documented, or how do we know that?
Well, my source is Temple Grandin, and many of you may know her name. She's an internationally known expert, having autism herself, and she speaks and writes about it a lot. And I asked her specifically about this because you will see different percentages. And she said, listen, everyone with autism, 100% of people with autism has SPD. And she went on to say that sensory issues are the biggest everyday problem of people with autism. They're battling sensory challenges all day long.
Okay. That makes sense when you think about what autism is and how it works. Can you describe a little bit more how to distinguish, how you, in your experience and what you've observed, the distinguishing features between ADHD and SPD?
Yeah. What they have in common is fidgetiness and inattention. People with SPD will be inattentive and fidgety because of underlying sensory problems. For instance, think of the child at school who's got an itchy tag in the back of his t-shirt and his sock seams are rubbing his feet. This is a very common problem with people who have tactile over-responsivity. Touch. That's touch over-responsivity. And imagine this kid sitting there and his clothes are making him crazy. The four chairs of his school desk chair, the four legs of his school desk chair do not touch the ground simultaneously. So he's tipping constantly. The fluorescent light bulbs overhead hum and flicker. And to most of us, we don't hear that hum or see that flicker. But I think of a lot of children and adults with SPD who are like canaries in the coal mine. They are going to be responding to environmental stimuli that the rest of us pass by. All of this is happening to the kid, and of course he's fidgety and inattentive. So does it look like ADD? You betcha. Let's put this kid on Ritalin, because a doctor uses that, that saying, if you hear hoofbeats, don't look for zebras. If you hear hoofbeats, look for horses. So ADD looks like SPD. But anyway, take away the sensory overload in that situation, and the child's behavior will be very different from the child with ADHD. There's also been research on giving kids tasks to do. And Susan, if I talk too much, you can...
No, please. It's fascinating.
Okay. Yeah. There's a research study where children were asked to look at a circle and a square. And when they saw the circle, they were to press a button on the right. When they saw the square, the button on the left. Fine. Children with SPD, children with ADHD understood the instructions, got it right. Then a new instruction was added. If they heard a bell after seeing a circle or a square, don't press the button. Well, kids with SPD heard the bell and refrained from pressing the button even when they saw a circle or a square. But the kids with ADHD had to press the button. So that's one small research study that shows that there's this impulsiveness that cannot be restrained. Then there's one more research study that's fascinating about how children and adults, again, react to a strobe light, a noxious noise, a whiff of a pleasant wintergreen oil that's passed under their nose, a chair, an unexpected chair tilt. I'm describing something called the Sensory Challenge Protocol that Lucy Jane Miller and her colleagues do in various places, confirming the same results everywhere. When a person with SPD has this strobe light and this wintergreen oil, they will show dramatic reactions that is expressed through their, it's called eccrine sweat, sweat that we sweat when we're anxious. People with ADHD who undergo this same battery of sensory stimuli do not have problems with the sniff of the oil or the tilt of the chair. They, the word is habituate the way typical people do. They hear it once, they alert, they express some of this eccrine sweat. What's that noise? What's that smell? And then they get used to it after subsequent stimulation. Kids with SPD do not habituate. So those are differences that, and those are two research studies that I know about, and there are lots more. But you have
that's really fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
The way the symptoms persist. There are some interesting questions from people whose children were treated at early ages and for sensory issues, and yet the sensory sensitivities seem to persist, but in different ways. So one example is from Lisa. She said, my son had a decent amount of OT, maybe 60 hours at the age of 9, and helped him with sensory issues and small motor skills. He's now 13. He still has trouble feeling food on his face, and he also will spend hours in a sandbox running sand through his hands. So any suggestions for helping him? And then she puts the ironic statement, obviously a 13-year-old in a sandbox with noodles on his face is becoming a social issue as well. So good to know Mom has a sense of humor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, is that a case where OT, seeing an OT would still be in order?
I would suggest a booster shot of OT because, you know, kids grow, their brains change. Some things in this young boy might be way better than they were with, you know, a few years ago, but others might still be an issue. For the sounds like a sensory discrimination problem in his tactile sense. If he's got noodles on his face, an idea for him might be before eating, stimulate his skin. One idea is like an electric toothbrush. You don't need the brush, you can just use the vibrating part and have him hold it up to his cheeks, for instance, to kind of stimulate his cheeks, or have him put the brush in his mouth and brush his teeth and brush the inside of his cheeks, or brush himself with a corn silk brush or a sponge or a terry cloth, washcloth, just his arms, his legs, his cheeks. That might help him get ready to be appropriately sensitive to stuff on his skin. He might also do a mirror check after a meal because really what we want to protect and develop is a kid's self-esteem. You don't want other people to laugh at you because you've got spaghetti all over your face.
Right.
Then now the sandbox thing, that looks like his self-therapy. So true, a 13-year-old in a sandbox is an unusual sight. Give him things at home before he goes to school, let him have a sandbox at home in a great big Rubbermaid tub, or give him a tub filled with rice or beans and let him run his hands through it. It's going to be pleasant and soothing and organizing for him. So it looks like he's looking for tactile input to help him get organized through his skin, and that his skin is not that sensitive. I recommend reading The Adolescent Child if you want to learn some more ideas.
You know, Carol, I remember I have a daughter with sensory integration issues, and I remember reading about the sensory diet, and I think that's what you're touching on by suggesting that certain activities like brushing or other treatments take place before activities.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's a key recommendation for the way parents can help, as I recall.
Yes,
and it's not an easy concept to. I know I had a hard time with it, so maybe you can explain it.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, Susan. Some people prefer a different term called sensory lifestyle.
Okay.
Which I like that myself better than diet. Diet to me suggests a reduction, and sensory lifestyle implies adding and broadening one's way of doing things in a stylish way. Okay, so a sensory lifestyle has three areas. A lifestyle introduces activities that develop and enhance three areas. One area is arousing. Many people with SPD have difficulty getting up, getting going, to start the day. A second kind of activity is for organizing, and a third is for calming. So this has to do with regulating oneself through the day. And people with ADD, with or without SPD, that's their issue too, getting organized all day. So what might be arousing for you or your child might be a hot shower in the morning. It might be a cold shower. It might be a soothing bath. You got to figure it out. It might be jumping on the trampoline. It might be wrapping yourself up tight in a TheraBand, which is something that OTs and gyms use, a stretchy vinyl band. It might be carrying the laundry basket upstairs or chewing on something crunchy like granola or a bagel. That might be arousing. Those things I just mentioned for another person might be organizing. For you, organizing might be running your hands through a bucket of kidney beans. So again, you can read, The Adolescent Child talks about this, another excellent book that has terrific ideas is called Building Bridges by Paula Aquila, Aquilla, and a couple of her colleagues. And then there are calming activities. What that might be a massage at the end of the day, or your hot bath at the end of the day. So you get to know yourself or your kid, and what are these things that you've noticed help the child get up and go and calm down. And please take notes. Take notes. You don't have to write paragraphs, but boy, it's so helpful to take notes. What are the things that arouse the kid? What are the things that calm him? And you'll begin to see patterns. So that's the idea of a sensory lifestyle. And an OT will provide families or adults with activities to do at home and to do at the job. They often include heavy work activities that can be arousing, organizing, and or calming. Heavy work activities are physical activities because you know what, we are so not physical these days. We are so tied to our computers. And a heavy work activity is washing the car, washing the dog, raking, shoveling, gardening, digging, carrying the heavy bags of groceries to the car and back into the house. Let's get old-fashioned. Let's use our bodies. I could go on and on, but I'm going to
Okay.
pause.
No, I think it's really, really helpful. We were told, I remember this, that joint compression activities, sort
Yes.
of gymnastics or ice skating, swimming, were
Yes.
all strong
Yes.
ways to treat SPD. And interestingly, swimming is often successful with kids with ADHD as well. Michael Phelps being one of the main, the most noteworthy one.
Definitely. And let me just say a word about that. Swimming and track and martial arts are among some of the activities where you don't have to have contact with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, during a swim practice in high school, you're going to bump into another swimmer in your lane, and there will be some. But it's not like football, for instance. You are competing against your own record, and you're trying to improve yourself all the time. And for some people who have tactile or proprioceptive issues, working on their own bodies comes first. And when you've got that secure, then you can start wrestling with other people. But swimming is a great one.
Okay. Let's see. You mentioned vision therapy as something that you found had positive impact. Can you talk a little bit about what vision therapy is and how one finds a vision therapist?
Yes. How one finds it. Go to, I think it's optometric extension, oed.org, I think. But you know what? Don't trust me. Just Google vision therapy, and
Okay.
you'll get the correct. I don't have it at my fingertips. Vision therapy is like occupational therapy for the eyes. I'm so glad you brought up this question. Ophthalmology is the field of the eye doctor who's concerned about the health of the eye. Optometry is the field of the eye doctor whose interest is the behavior of the eye. And don't go to an ophthalmologist, go to an optometrist. He's called a developmental or behavioral optometrist. And this doctor will help you understand what your visual problems are. An example is a lot of people like me, I tend toward monovision. I have to work really hard to get my two eyes to work together so I see two separate images and merge them into one. And with therapy, I have learned how to develop that muscular skill to get both eyes working together because I was right-eyed for many years. Reading is sometimes difficult. Merging into traffic, parallel parking, writing figures on the page, writing a list of things you want to add up. Seeing the columns everything can be wavery. Looking at the horizon, looking at the person holding the frisbee way down the beach and watching him throw that frisbee and watching the frisbee come through the air, that can be very difficult for a person who doesn't have good depth perception. Convergence, that's how we watch that frisbee from afar come closer to us, or how we look at the bulletin board at the front of the classroom and then look at the book on our desk. That's convergence and divergence. These are all very common problems, and most visual problems are overlooked. It's like 70% of visual problems are overlooked.
Wow.
Huge number. So please.
So, two people have posted the same site, College of Optometrists interests in vision development,
Thank you.
www.covd.org.
That's what
and
I
has
was
a
looking
page,
for.
Vision Therapy. So it looks like a very useful resource.
Thank you, yes.
Okay, great. Can SPD cause generalized body pain? This is from Alana. Or do routine aches and pains just seem magnified in someone with SPD?
Gosh, can it cause pain? I'm going to go with my contributors to my book who have talked about the physical pain, and it's not imagined. It is physical. So the tactile and the vestibular over responsivity can cause this physical pain. I know a little girl, she was about 9 years old, and she was longing to take dancing lessons, and she could not tolerate the leotard. She said, "Mommy, it burns." And then Paul Balius, this wonderful gentleman who I quoted from earlier, he talks about the physical pain of sound. He is unable to go out for dinner. It's not just the noise, the clatter, and the too loud music in restaurants. It's things like the sound of other people chewing. It's painful. So, yes, it's real. It's really real.
Wow. Okay. Becky says, what are your thoughts relating to recent research connecting SPD and trigeminal neuralgia, the trigeminal nerve? Have you
Becky, I'm sorry. I think I have read that, and I'm sorry. I don't
remember.
I don't know enough about it.
Not a problem. Okay. KS says, I tried something recently called the havening technique, which combines stroking massage with focus. It helped me tremendously as an adult. Can I help a mature teenager who may not understand how to do this? I'm not sure I do. Stroking and massage with focus. It's interesting.
Yes, and I have not heard of that. What did you say? Havening?
Havening. I think it was havening technique.
Havening. I'm unaware of that. I will look for that. I love this, that people are coming with such great...
people have some always have interesting concepts. Yeah, this person just reinforced what a strong sense of pain from wearing clothes, and I think that's what you just described, right?
Yeah.
There's a teacher, we often have teachers on our webinars, and she's asking if you have any insights for how she can identify the children in the classroom who might be suffering from SPD.
Oh,
and
thank you.
That she can address that.
Thank you for asking that question. Two wonderful moms, Lori Renke and Carrie Fannin are their names. They're SI moms. Came up with the term sensory goggles. Put on your sensory goggles, which are imaginary lenses, so that you can look at your child's behavior and ask yourself these two questions, and this is really great in a classroom. One question is, what sensation is that kid trying to get away from? Is it the flickering sunlight through the Venetian blinds? Is it the fluorescent light bulbs that's making him cover his ears and sit under his desk? Is it somebody's foot under the shared table that just grazed his ankle that sends him into a tizzy? So put on your goggles, look for the immediate antecedent of a child's cry or meltdown. It might not be something that happened 5 seconds ago. It might be something that happened half an hour ago, too. With your goggles on, ask the second question. What sensations might this child be striving to get more of? And in today's classroom, today's workplace, today's world, when we are sitting so much and indoors so much, the body hasn't caught up to the 21st century. The body says, let me run. Let me move. I am born to move. And too many of our children are constrained in their little seats. If you've got a fidgety kid with SPD or with ADHD, one idea is put a road at the back of the classroom, make it with masking tape and make it straight or make it curvy, and that's the pacing road. And let your wigglers, when they're wiggling, go to the back of the room and quietly walk back and forth on the tape just to get some action. That's one thing. Never, 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 this is the second thing, never deny recess. The wigglier a kid is, the more recess he needs. And denying recess so that he sits in and gets his work done that he didn't do because he was wiggling. I forgot the beginning of my sentence. Denying recess is counterproductive. To get children to attend and be organized, they have to do a lot of moving. And the gross motor activities are the best. Running, swinging, climbing. If you want kids to get better with the handwriting, have them sit on a therapy ball and wiggle and jiggle and bounce on a therapy ball while they're trying it after they've had half an hour of vigorous recess. All right, so your goggles tell you what do kids need to get away from, what do they need more of. Since you've got a class with disparate personalities and sensory needs in it, I can tell you recess helps everybody. Proprioceptive activities help everybody. Proprioceptive activities bring heavy work sensations into the muscles and joints. So have your kids stand up and go to the wall, press on the wall with all their might with their hands, and then with all their might with their shoulders and with their buttocks. Have them get on the floor, press their feet on the wall, or sit at their tables and press their hands down on the tabletop and press down like they're trying to punch a hole through the table. Press their feet through the floor. Take a second and do some of these deep pressure, hard work movements, and you will get results. You'll get calmer, more organized people, whether they're over-responsive, under-responsive, don't have SPD at all, don't have any issue at all. All kids will benefit from that kind of thing. Oh, and I got one more thing. Yeah. I could go on. I could go on and on. One more thing, dear teachers, look at your kids' posture. This is a big giveaway. Do children turn sideways and listen to you with one eye through the edge of one eye? Peripheral vision is a big pointer that there's a visual issue going on. Do young children who sit on the floor, are they sitting in the W position with their knees close together and their ankles splayed way out? Big, big characteristic of kids with vestibular and proprioceptive issues who need that wide base to support themselves. They can't sit comfortably. They'll topple over if their legs are in a cross in front of them. So look for posture. Do they have to be right up under your nose so they can hear you and see you better? And you're always saying, sit back, sit back, sit back. To me, those would be red flags of SPD.
Okay. Linda says, our teacher put a standing table in the classroom and opened it up to any child instead of just pointing out any one particular child, just made it available to any child who wanted to stand up. It seemed like a wonderful technique. I wanted to pass that one on.
Yes,
and
wonderful.
From KS, she's posted a link to the Havening. It's Havening, HAVENING.org, and there's helps for many things from SPD to other disorders, definitely for anxiety, which can be attached to SPD. So that's a recommendation from KS. So I'm afraid we're out of time, Carol. We could go on for a long time, and I hope all of you listening in will find Carol's books. They are really wonderful resources, The Out of Sync Child and her latest book, The Out of Sync Child Grows Up. Thanks, everyone, and see you next week. Thanks, Carol.
Bye-bye.